Today on Commander Replay, it's a tale of 4 towers. Can Vorinclex Voice of Hunger pump out the mana to power up our 4 towers of power? Find out next on Commander Replay. Welcome back, everyone. Today we're playing a deck that I've been meaning to do for quite a while. That is Vorinclex, Voice of Hunger, and the 4 towers. So, the inspiration for this deck, I was playing Standard when Vorinclex was first released, and at the time I wasn't playing Commander, so the question I had to myself was, when you're at 8 mana, what could you possibly need to double your mana for? Because being a Standard player, 8 mana should already win you the game. But it wasn't until a while later when I started playing Commander and realized that there are plenty of things you can do with crap tons of mana. So what I decided was I wanted to use the 4 towers from the Mirrodin block because they're all super expensive to activate, and they have generally good abilities, except that they're all way too expensive for what they actually do. They're sort of like this huge inefficient mana sink, which is good for a deck that just wants to make oodles and oodles of mana. So our primary focus in this deck is to get our 4 towers into play. There is a 5th tower, and it's the one that mills, and it's just awful. For like 8, I think it mills 8 cards out of your opponent's library or something like that, so it's just not playable at all. So instead of using that one, I've used Tower of Calamities from Scars of Mirrodin, which does 12 damage to a creature, which is at least decent removal, even though it is really expensive to use. Unfortunately, Aladdin's Lamp hasn't been printed on Magic Online, because that's a card that I do also enjoy using in super high mana ramp decks. But anyway, taking a quick look at the towers, we have Tower of Fortunes, pay 8, draw 4 cards. That's the only one that's probably actually worth its activation cost. We have Tower of Eons, gain 10 life, and not really worth it. I'd say if that cost 4 or 5 mana, it'd probably be fine. Next we have Tower of Champions. Even though this one's really expensive to use, it does help us close out the game a little bit quicker because we can make Vorinclex or whatever creature we have in play decently bigger with +6/+6. And as we already talked about, Tower of Calamities has the ability to act as removal. So obviously just tons and tons of mana ramp in this deck. We have 39 lands, Mana Crypt, Mana Vault, Sol Ring, and Grim Monolith. We're also running Doubling Cube. We're running Cultivate, Kodama's Reach, Hunting Wilds. Hunting Wilds will grab us 2 forests, Sky Shroud Claim, we have Ranger's Path, Oracle of Moldiah, so just all of the ramp in this deck. Let's take a look at some of the other ways that we can spend our mana. So we have Planar Portal, which allows us to pay 6 and search for any card. We have Planar Bridge, which allows us to pay 8 and search for a permanent and put it directly into play. I've really come to love Planar Bridge. It is really good in decks that can support it. We have Book of Wrath just to act as more card draw. We have Seasons Past in this deck just so we can return things from our graveyard to our hand. Zendikar Resurgent, more mana doubling. We have Ugin. Ugin will be one of our primary sources of removal. Since we're in mono green focusing heavily on ramp, we don't have a ton of removal in our deck, so Ugin is one of the primary ways that we'll be able to deal with our opponent's stuff, and having Planar Bridge or Planar Portal is going to help us to ensure that Ugin actually gets into play. So you can't have a big mana deck without Genesis Wave. And then finally, I just have some Eldrazi at the top end to actually give us a way to close out the game. So we have Kozilek, Butcher of Truth, Kozilek the Great Distortion, Ulamog the Infinite Gyre, and finally Emrakul the Promised End. So this is not the most competitive version of this deck. There's plenty of more efficient ways to win the game when you have tons and tons of mana available. This deck really just wants to fool around with having these 4 towers in play. What I have noticed playing some games in the past is that when you're able to make like 30 mana, even if you're not actually closing out the game, a lot of opponents will just scoop it up because they're so far behind. So we'll see if that happens today or not. But yeah, let's go find a game. All right, here we are playing some Vorinclex and the 4 towers. We won the die roll, so we'll play first. That hand is unfortunately not going to work. I hate passing on a turn 1 Mana Crypt, but we only have 1 land, so we definitely need to mulligan that. This hand is still kind of questionable at 2 lands. We have a Ranger's Path at 4, but we're not guaranteed to actually hit 4 mana quickly. I'm gonna mulligan to 6. Yeah, that's not much better. We're gonna keep this 6. Dungrove Elder on top. We'll keep the Dungrove Elder. So we draw the Dungrove Elder. We will play a forest and pass. So as I said, we're playing Vorinclex, Voice of Hunger. Vorinclex is an 8 mana 7/6 with Trample. Whenever you tap a land for mana, add 1 mana to your mana pool of any type that land would produce. Whenever an opponent taps a land for mana, that land is not untapped during its controller's next untap step. Vorinclex is one of the biggest lightning rods that you can play, because it means that opponents can't use their mana the way they want to. Well, basically have to skip some or all of their next turn depending on how much mana they tap. So, Champion's Helm is really important protecting our Vorinclex, because Vorinclex will just absolutely eat removal. Anyway, let's take a look at what our opponents are playing. We have Prime Speaker Zagana is a 6-mana 1/1. When it enters the battlefield, it gets X +1/+1 counters, where X is the greatest power among creatures you control. And when it enters the battlefield, draw cards equal to its power. Usually cares about playing big green creatures, then drawing a ton of cards. Prime Speaker Zagana can be pretty strong. Next, we have the Scarab God, is a 5-mana 5/5. At the beginning of your upkeep, each opponent loses X life, and you scry X, where X is the number of zombies you control. Pay 4, exile target creature card from a graveyard, create a token that's a copy of it, except it's a 4/4 black zombie. And finally, when the Scarab God dies, return it to its owner's hand at the beginning of the next end step. So we catch another land. Land is good. Unfortunately, we don't really have any ramp in this hand. And then finally, we have Reese the Redeemed. Pay 3, make a token. Pay 6, make a whole bunch of tokens. Almost exclusively an elf/token deck. So I played with this deck a little bit. This deck has a lot of variance in it. The fact that Vorinclex cost 8 makes it really difficult to get into play quickly. And even with as much ramp as we're running, sometimes this deck is just prone to really bad opening hands. Essence Warden for our opponent. Ooh, Grim Monolith is really helpful. So I'm not going to run it out there yet, just because I don't want to subject it to artifact removal. But for the moment, we're going to play the Windswept Heath and go crack and find a forest. And then we will play our Dungrove Elder. And opponent's going to gain some life off the Essence Warden. If we could hit a Cultivate or a Kodama's Reach on our next turn, that would be beautiful. We really don't want to miss our next land drop. You may wonder why I'm running a fetch land in a monocolor deck, and it's because I'm running the Crucible of Worlds combo, where if we have Crucible of Worlds in play and a fetch land in our graveyard, we can essentially keep playing the land from our graveyard, and that way we don't have to miss a land drop. I would also settle for Crucible of Worlds next turn. Temple of Plenty for our opponent. They're going to scry one. Oh my god. Oh, we hit a Cultivate. Oh, that is so beautiful. Oh, the magic gods are looking down on us today. So that means we get to both accelerate a land and make our land drop for the turn, which is a really big deal. That also makes our Dungrove Elder a 5/5. In terms of threat analysis, Reese the Redeemed can be scary because if they make a whole bunch of tokens, that's hard to deal with. But I've never really seen a really good Reese the Redeemed deck, honestly. The Scarab God is very powerful and makes people lose life very quickly. Prime Speaker Zagana usually draws half their deck, which is really problematic. So I'm going to send the first poke into Prime Speaker Zagana. That way once the Scarab God comes into play and everyone starts losing life, it'll put a little bit of pressure on the Prime Speaker. I'm not going to focus them down super hard just because I don't want to draw their wrath. Sweet, we drew a land. Nice. So drop the land, play the Grim Monolith. Unfortunately, one short of Vorinclex. Play the Champion's Helm so we can get some protection on Vorinclex next turn. So put the Helm on Dungrove Elder, and we'll swing into the Scarab God. Right now, we'll just kind of spread the damage around. Not looking to piss off any one player too much. So Scarab God down to 33. Fathom Mage coming in for the Prime Speaker opponent is a 1/1 with Evolve, and whenever a +1/+1 counter is put on it, you may draw a card. So unfortunately, if we played our Grim Monolith instead of the Dungrove Elder, we would have been able to get Vorinclex down last turn, which would have been cool. But at the position I was in, I wasn't entirely sure if we were actually going to find the lands we needed to be able to do that. So I felt comfortable just getting the Dungrove Elder down there and swinging in for the damage. We have a Fact or Fiction from our opponent. They reveal Noxious Ghoul, Tidings, Clever Impersonator, and 2 islands. I think I like their original pile better. I'd say the Tidings pile is probably the one you go with. I personally would have divvied that up differently. Wayfaring Temple coming in for our opponent. Has power toughness equal to the number of creatures you control. Whenever it deals combat damage to a player, you may populate. And Reese the Redeemed gains more life, up to 44. We draw another land. I like lands. This deck needs to make land drops. So play the forest. Cast our Vorinclex.
Commander!
Vorinclex coming into play. Opponent's going to gain more life. We're gonna try to move the Champion's Helm over to the Vorinclex. And we resolve it. Nice. So we are in a good position to untap with our Vorinclex next turn. I'm going to send the Dungrove Elder into the Prime Speaker. I'm going to give them the option to block with the Fathom Mage. I wouldn't mind if they just chump with the Fathom Mage. Prime Speaker decides to take the damage and drops down to 28. So the next thing we want to try to find, if we don't draw anything exciting, we're going to play our Tower of Calamities next turn. But ideally, I'd like to find some card draw at some point. So opponent taps the land, gets their first Vorinclex trigger. That land will not untap during its next untap step. Unfortunately, on Magic Online, all those triggers go on separately. I'm going to auto-yield that trigger. Trigon Predator comes into play for the Prime Speaker opponent. They get an Evolve trigger, and they'll draw a card off of that. So in all likelihood, on our next turn, I will shoot down that Trigon Predator with the Crushing Vines, because they very likely would target us and hit the Champion's Helm. Forgotten Ancient for the Prime Speaker opponent. So Forgotten Ancient could actually get really big. That is a possible target for our Tower of Calamities. So the Prime Speaker opponent tapped out all their lands on the plays that they made last turn, so none of their lands will be untapping, which means we'll kind of have a free roll against them next turn. When we control Vorinclex, it puts our opponents under immense pressure to decide how they want to use their mana, because those lands will all skip their next untap step. In a way, it almost feels like anything other than playing removal on Vorinclex is not worth the mana that you paid to cast it. It's almost like everything costs double what it actually does. So the Scarab God comes into play and taps out all but one of their lands, and no action from Reese, so back to our turn, and land is good. Lands are always good. First thing up is get this Tower of Calamities into play. Forgotten Ancient's going to trigger one time. I'm going to auto-yield that ability. So right now we have enough mana to leave up our Tower of Calamities and leave up our Crushing Vines. I'm going to keep swinging into our opponents. We've clearly made ourselves the threat. There's no way around it at this point. So might as well just keep getting damage in. Yeah, I'm gonna go after the Scarab God with Vorinclex, and then just leave Dungrove Elder back as a blocker. So Vorinclex gets in. Scarab God drops down to 24 and has 9 commander damage. And we'll pass the turn, leave up instant abilities. Forgotten Ancient gets another counter on it. Opponent's lands don't untap this turn. Ooh. So it moves a counter from the Forgotten Ancient to the Fathom Mage. That's a pretty good combo. So Trigon Predator coming into us. Definitely going to shoot that down with the Crushing Vines. So shoot the Trigon Predator. Another trigger for the Forgotten Ancient, but I'm going to shoot down the Forgotten Ancient right now. Tower! So Crushing Vines takes care of the Trigon Predator, and Tower of Calamities takes care of the Forgotten Ancient. So Scarab God gets a Scry trigger, but they do not control any zombies, so no Scry, no life loss. Scarab God's lands don't untap. So Reese the Redeemed taps out for a White Sun Zenith. They did that on the Scarab God's end step. So White Sun is X3, they'll get 3 cat tokens and gain 3 life. So I'm not actually entirely sure how we're going to get through this Reese the Redeemed opponent. Our deck is not super well suited to dealing with token decks. Wayfaring Temple is now a 6/6. And Reese the Redeemed is up to 51 life. Back to our turn, we draw a Cavern of Souls. So we'll play the Cavern on Praetor. I am tempted to Seasons Past for the Cultivate and the Windswept Heath, but I don't know. It feels like we can wait one more turn on that. I'm just going to keep swinging into the Scarab God with Vorinclex. So opponent decides to block with their Scarab God. Vorinclex does have Trample, though, so some of that's going to trample through. So opponent takes 4. They go to 13 Commander and 20 life, and Scarab God will return to their hand at the end step. So Prime Speaker Zagana gets an untap step. Let's see what they decide to do this turn. Ooh, opponent plays a Beast Within on the Champion's Helm. So we will definitely Seasons Past that back to our hand next turn. Unfortunately, most of the things in our graveyard cost 3, so not a lot of value sitting around for that Seasons Past yet. So opponent is trying to imprison in the moon our Vorinclex. So right here, it makes sense for us to shoot down our own Vorinclex, which is very sad, but it is the correct play. Also, I'm going to tap some additional mana so we can untap our Grim Monolith and recast Vorinclex. So shoot down our Vorinclex.
Tower of Power, Flower, Sour, Hour.
Imprison in the Moon fizzles. We have a bunch of mana left over. And a Rampant Growth for our opponent. And we're going to untap our Grim Monolith. So good plays by our opponent. It will cost them most of another turn, though. So that is good news for us. Unfortunately, Vorinclex is the type of commander that makes you a ton of enemies on the table. Gilded Lotus for the Scarab God opponent. Gilded Lotus will be very handy against what we're doing. Clever Impersonator comes in as a copy of the Essence Warden, so opponent really feeling the life loss and just trying to get some life back. Also probably a pretty good play with Reese the Redeemed on board. Reese has 6 mana, so they could potentially make a ton of tokens. So Reese the Redeemed's gonna use their pay 6 ability and make a token that's a copy of every creature they control. So whole bunch of Essence Warden triggers go on the stack. Wayfaring Temple is now a 9/9. Opponent has 6/2/2 cats. Wayfaring Temple comes in at us, and the Prime Speaker Zagana opponent scoops it up. Yeah, so like I was saying in the deck tech, even if you don't necessarily have the win, opponents just get really frustrated playing against Vorinclex because they can't actually cast things. The question here is, do we block with the 3/3, or do we just take the damage? I think we block with the 3/3. Ugin would be an incredible top deck. So back to our turn, we draw a Crossing Grip. Not super helpful right here, so our play is going to be to recast Vorinclex. Vorinclex coming back into play.
Commander.
Unfortunately, we have to leave blockers up right now, so we can't do much else. We can leave mana open for our Crossing Grip. Next turn, I'm going to look to Seasons Past and get a few things back from our graveyard. We really need to find some card draw, though. Card draw or Ugin, or both. Mechanized production for our opponent. Yeah, we will probably Crossing Grip that. So, Crossing Grip looks like it's going to come in handy. Scarab God coming back into play. So, 2 Essence Warden triggers go on the stack. Scarab God's back up to 25, and Reese the Redeemed is all the way up to 58. Based on the way this game is going, I think Reese the Redeemed is very far ahead. Unfortunately, we need the Scarab God opponent to cast a board wipe, but because we keep messing up all their lands, that is not super likely. So, Reese the Redeemed plays an Hour of Reckoning. Ooh. Destroy all non-token creatures. That's a card, huh? So I'm gonna Crossing Grip the Gilded Lotus. And Reese the Redeemed is still very far ahead. Reese the Redeemed sends 2 cats into us. At least the Wayfaring Temple is gone. And Reese the Redeemed coming back into play, we draw a Mosswort Bridge. So we get the Hideaway ability, we're gonna look at 4 cards. Yeah, Ulamog is the only one under there that's potentially interesting. So Vorinclex costs 12 right now. 12 is a lot. We have 2 choices. We can play the Seasons Pass for really bad value and get back 2 cards. Or we can use our mana to shoot down Reese the Redeemed, and I'm thinking that might be the right play, because opponent just has to tap 6, and they'll have a ton of tokens. Oop, and we waited way too long to do that. Shit. Because the Scarab God didn't untap, I got confused whose turn it was, and did not activate the Tower of Calamities in time. Opponent plays a Legion's Landing, and they are definitely going to get to flip that Legion's Landing. I love the art on these flip cards from Ixalan. They look really good. Yeah, opponent sends most of their creatures into us. Legion's Landing is going to transform. So now opponent can tap 4 lands to make a 1/1 vampire with lifelink. No blocks for us. We're going to take some damage here. Down to 25. Question right here is, do we shoot down Reese with the Tower of Calamities, or do we untap our Grim Monolith? I think we untap our Grim Monolith. We draw a Doubling Cube. We might be able to potentially do some things with that. 12, 13. We have 13 total mana currently. If we play our Doubling Cube, we will have 16 mana, which means we'd have Vorinclex plus 4. Yeah, I think we have to do that. We need to get Vorinclex back in play. Almost messed up the Doubling Cube. I don't know why I almost always mess up the Doubling Cube.
Commander!
And we'll use the 4 to untap Grim Monolith. And pass our turn. Have to hope Scarab God has a board wipe. Otherwise, we probably die to the onslaught of tokens. Ooh, a Mind's Dilation for the Scarab God opponent. That'll be pretty good because they're essentially cheating mana costs, which is really good when Vorinclex is in play. Wow, no attacks off the Reese the Redeemed opponent. That is super helpful. I'm not entirely sure why they wouldn't just swing everything into us. I would have if I were in their position. Maybe they're really afraid of the Mind's Dilation, but I'm not entirely sure. Opponent taps out for an Elesh Norn. Oh, we draw a Kozilek the Great Distortion, which will be really helpful because we need to draw cards. And the next thing we need to think about is how we want to use our mana. Yeah, those tokens are huge. I think we're on the Ugin or Bust plan right now. So I think we tap everything except the Mosswort Bridge. And then double that with Doubling Cube and just hope we get lucky. We do need to make sure we keep some colorless mana up, so we'll pay with the green. Cast Kozilek. Mind's Dilation's gonna trigger. Yeah, that's bad. They're gonna get our Zendikar Resurgent. We draw the tower. The tower means there's hope. We do have 26 mana. 26 mana is a good way to get things done. So, cast the Tower of Fortunes. Draw with the Tower of Fortunes. Tower! We draw a Reliquary Tower. That's nice. Boundless Realms is cool. So play the Reliquary Tower, cast the Mana Crypt. Just so that I don't forget, I'm gonna play our Mosswort Bridge card, which is Ulamog. Use the Ulamog trigger to blow up Elesh Norn, so that we can possibly survive until our next turn. The choice here is Kozilek, Butcher of Truth, or Boundless Realms. I kind of want the Boundless Realms just because that'll pull a lot of the lands out of our deck. So we tap that goes up to 15, that brings us up to 17. Oh, that gives us exactly enough. We can Boundless Realms and Kozilek. Nice. So, Boundless Realms. We get 11 lands to search for, so that's gonna get most of them. So we get a whole bunch of lands, and then we pay 10 for Kozilek the Butcher of Truth. So we have most of the legendary Eldrazi in play. We draw 4 more cards, nothing terribly exciting in there. And both of our opponents aren't really going to get a chance to untap lands this turn, which means that there's actually a way that we could win this game. If nothing goes wrong, we can annihilate the Reese Redeemed opponent for 8. Even though they have quite a few tokens, that'll actually put a pretty big dent in their board state. Wow, Reese the Redeemed scooped it up. Can't deal with their lands not untapping and all the Annihilator. Nice. Oh my god, we got there. So that was... I didn't think we were going to win that game at all. I thought Reese the Redeemed was just going to run us over. Yeah, so... when you can make tons and tons of mana, you can do some really silly things. The doubling cube with the Vorinclex, finding the Kozilek to refill our hand, then play the other Kozilek to destroy the Elishnorn, and then... or play the Ulamog to destroy Elishnorn, and then play the other Kozilek to draw a bunch of cards, plus the Boundless Realms. Oh my god, I can't believe we won that. Oh, that's incredible. This deck is a lot of fun. There are many more efficient things that you can do with tons of mana, but it is fun to just mess around with these towers. Anyway, that's going to do it for today. Thank you. If you liked the video, feel free to comment, like, or subscribe. Thank you for watching.